Hello. Just checking how it works. First time live on my phone. First time live on my phone. Yo. Okay. So it's live because it's easier. You don't need to edit. Don't need to do anything. Raw is best. So yeah. I said I've made a small poll on my community tab of the YouTube channel, and somebody actually voted to speak about bullying next time, and delivering on my promise. So this is quite a story basically to begin with. Let's say, where did my own story begin with bullying? It began with childhood already, at home. So clearly, not all the bullies are just in the kindergarten or at school or in your playground or somewhere like that, but most often it's just starts at home. For me, it started with my own dad. He was really very violent and just demanding, of course, in the sense of wanted to and impose his own rules and his own will for whatever the cost. Now I don't want to go into too many details, so stuff can be brutal, stuff can be nasty, so it is what it is. Then because of his own, what can I say directly as it is, because of his own mental issues, because of his own problems and stuff, we lived in a place in which a lot of apartment blocks being quite close together to one another, and in a kind of culture where everybody knows everything about everyone. So during the breakout of the Yugoslavian war, there were just many tensions around the people and different nationalities, whether you were Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian, Slovenian. To me it didn't matter, but to a lot of people at that time started to matter a lot, and it was just based on that alone. There was a lot of aggression, there was a lot of violence, there were a lot of fights, there was just a lot of mess. Basically, the place I used to live was considered kind of like almost like a ghetto, but not in a sense of the ghettos you would be used to see on the TV, just in a sense of maybe how dangerous it was, and that often the police had to come together with backup already in order to be sure that they're safe themselves. Although it was more often stabbing and stuff like that rather than guns and firearms being involved in general. However, having said that, so with all of that being in mind in general, somehow my family and my father became more popular, so to speak. So yeah, it was very, very different for me. We had a primary school, I think, of roughly about less than 1,000 students, and I would say that I was probably the most picked on target from all of them, for the duration of about 5 years in total. So a lot of things happened, and I've seen, let's say, some of the scenes are still like a movie in my head, but I would say that now I see that from a more like a helicopter view perspective, from a completely different point of view already for a very, very long time. So let's say going exactly to this part, to the primary school. So processing all of this later on as a teenager when I moved to another place, to a different. First of all, it was also I actually was put into a foster family for. It was not gonna be for a determined time. However, even in that family, a relative of those of the foster carers, the relative was one of the aggressive type. He had a daughter that was a bit messed up, I would say, already very young. So she was quite vulgar, yeah, I would say for that age. Um, and she would obviously blame others for whatever her actions were. So I got my ass kicked when I was little. So then I basically contacted the social services myself and I said that if I was gonna be beaten up, I prefer to have that at home rather than in someone else's home that I don't really, that are not my parents and it's not my family. So yeah, about a year and a half later, I went back and then I landed back in the same school where I was before. So kind of even more mocked and more bullied than before. So it was then between the age of 8.5 till 13 was just terrible. So having later having later to spend a lot of time trying to process all that and stuff like that, it wasn't easy, of course. But what did really help at some point, well, what helped the most, of course, practicing forgiveness and all of those things, of course, help in any case. That's for a fact, as much as a cliche it can sound. And it did sound to me as well in many occasions, of course, when I was younger. But one of those moments, I remember I walked into a coffee bar and I saw one of those scariest, biggest guys who was bullying me and even my father the most in the building where we lived. And he was the one working in a coffee bar and had to serve me. And I believe he actually recognized me but completely acted as if he doesn't know me. But it was really funny because I made him walk around a couple of times and left him no tip and clearly made him aware that I also remember him. And yeah, I think it felt quite humiliating for him. So that was maybe the moment where you could get maybe that kind of like a sweet vengeance on a bully. And it's the kind of vengeance that actually is okay, and I would approve it myself. Then second one was one of the guys who was also extremely aggressive and violent in my class in the school, but about a foot shorter than myself, and I wasn't really among the tallest in my class by far. So I was actually before him, I was the shortest one. So he clearly had to fight me to prove something to other peers in the class. And when he did, and I finally stood up to him once, he waited for me after the school with some backup, did whatever he had to do. So that's not the point. But years on later, I'm on the train and I see a very familiar face, and it's that same guy in a military uniform going. So at that point, the serving 6 months, I think, was still obligatory in Slovenia. So he was serving his part, returning home for the weekend, and I see him there, sat down right in front of his face, and I saw just the terrifying fear on his face, thinking what is going to happen to him right now. And I just calmly told him that I'm not here to make any fights or anything, and we had a good chat and all of those things. So seeing his eyes, seeing into his eyes, realizing that whatever pain he had caused to me in that moment was actually much worse for him, because I had to bear that pain for a short moment, and processing that wasn't too difficult, to be honest. But he had to live with it up until that moment, and probably a lot later on to continue with, before he could have dealt with. But I guess telling him that I forgave him and it's all good must have helped, and I hope it did. Because at the end of the day, um, what I've learned from pretty much most of these people, except I would guess those couple of the latest ones, like the crazy Polish guy who almost killed me, and then this crazy guy who sent a SWAT team on me. And those people I cannot still explain and understand. I wish I could talk to them and get some answers. But generally, when it comes to the bullies themselves, I realized how often it turns out that they're the kind of people who are way more in pain and need some kind of help, a lot more than, let's say, myself or someone else around them. Even though they play this tough game, tough people game, the bullies can be men or women, it doesn't matter. So yeah, that was for that, for example. And then later, as I was growing up, at 17, I left my home, so I was kind of like a high school dropout, not living exactly on the streets, but I was living in a squat with a bunch of other people, ages from, let's say, somewhere from, yeah, my age, 16, 17, up to about, I think at that point was about 30 or something, 35. There were a couple of homeless people in that same building, but it was a huge building, so basically if you wanted to get to them, you would have to walk across the building for about 10 minutes. So they were not exactly living with us, but we often were hanging out together. So, I mean, or they came to our kitchen, for example. So in that place, like punk rockers, anarchists, all cool, stuff like that, we had loads of good times. However, every now and then, the alcohol would just cloud people's minds, and shit and emotions were running hot. And then and there you would see which people are completely living in a denial or a cognitive dissonance with themselves, like they're speaking one thing and their actions are another. So one of the best examples was one of the people I actually liked quite a lot. He was a huge pro-feminist, but turns out he was beating his own girlfriend at home, and obviously he was passing down the cycle from his own father, who was beating the mother at home and stuff like that. So then a few other guys, like obviously the strongest and the biggest, but when it comes to, pardon, when it comes to their own bodies even responding, getting punched, they were one of the weakest guys I've ever seen. Like you punch a guy or you touch him and he already gets a just huge marks on their face and stuff, for example, or on their skin. So generally very sensitive person, but one of the biggest bullies ever. So yeah, let's say this was quite hard to deal with, because it took, in many occasions, it was impossible to ever actually, because these people were already more closing into adulthood and stuff, and then later on you could never go and get back to talk to them. So some of the things just stayed unresolved and unsaid, and you basically have to let go and move on, because there's no better way. So having gone back, gone back, having gone through all this, then later on I became a father, and as I was at that point already, I think, or just about before, I can't remember exactly now. So I know I was already, at that time, I was in a relationship with my now first ex-wife, and we had an anniversary with all the kids from the school, from the primary school, because at that point, what I actually had a much bigger problem with was not the bullies and the kids from the families with, you know, questionable parenting methods, I would say. Mm, what I had much bigger problem with, and I still do to this day, are people who see bad stuff happening, whether it's bullying, whether it's abuse, whether it's something else. So when they see injustice happening and someone who cannot defend themselves and help themselves, when they see this happening, they just walk past by and ignore, as if there's nothing they could do, they should do, as if there's no need, yeah, to treat others just as they would like to be treated themselves, for sure, especially in such situations. So I've always had like this mixed feelings about it, whether it's maybe anger, sadness, whatever it is, but nothing really much nice to say, really, to be honest, about such people. And even then, even though today it's still difficult, then this anniversary happened. And at the anniversary, what I found out to be extremely surprising at that point, I wasn't aware until I've seen it with my own eyes, um, how difficult it was for a lot of these classmates, you know, the girls and the boys, um, how difficult it was for them to actually stand there, do nothing, because, you know, at the end of the day, I understand they felt helpless and afraid, of course. And it's very difficult when you feel that way, but the only possible choice, or the best choice you can still do, is still to take an action. You know, of course you're not going to go and fight with the bully, I guess, but if one of them stood up in the class and told the teacher what was actually going on and what was wrong, then next time it would be two, and then next time three and stuff, and then the next time probably everyone should be addressing the bully. Because, for example, in my case, and that was, I don't know, some kind of strange culture back then, and I think for the most part it might still be the same, which is really bad for the kids who get bullied and abused, because most of them will get bullied and abused also at home. And also for the bullied kids, we need to probably look into what's going on in their background. The problem is, they used to send me actually to the school advisor, as they called them, which was basically just some kind of psychologist who didn't succeed in psychology enough. And then what they would be doing stuff which I couldn't really explain as a kid, and really it made no sense to me later on. I don't remember much what it was on about, but it was basically just asking silly questions, stupid pictures, draw stupid pictures and stuff like that. And to me it was just, okay, you know, like, I would have never given, not that I didn't want to, but I just never gave them answers that they expected, and they couldn't figure out that there's nothing really bloody wrong with me. So instead of addressing bullying as some sort of like a community and a whole class and a whole team, it was always kind of compartmentalized and isolated, and it became a single problem, clearly for the victim. And I think, and I see that nowadays in this social media driven, self-centered, narcissistic society, for the most part, I mean, for the most part, I'm being too harsh here, but there's quite a lot of narcissism flying under the radar, and we don't see that. And then, because today also men, I would say, are looked uh, down, quite down on, and then also any kind of voice of dissent, the difference in opinion is just being cancelled and squashed down with no good arguments usually, or even if there are good arguments, they're not being used. It's just a lot of stuff that's going on is really based on emotions and emotional responses and emotional reactions, which is really strange. And then, such as in my case, of the relationship later on. This is where I cracked down when I would say an accumulation of the patterns which I've seen and from my parents and from the people whom I used to call friends and then they betrayed me, and the relationships which were just kind of painful, cheating, deceitful, dishonest, disrespectful. All of that kind of compiled and accumulated in my, yeah, I could say that to the point of the end of 2019, I could say kind of like my home. Don't want to make it sound selfish and egocentric, but it was basically and technically just the place that I was working for and I contributed for with my own hands. So, and then I don't say that obviously my partner didn't do her part as we were agreeing, yeah, which is, you know, trying to keep the place in order with where I would help as much as I could, and was yeah, I admit I'm a lazy person, but if you know, if you do ask me nicely and stuff, I'm not gonna say no. That's for sure. I'm not an asshole. Um, Although in many occasions I might have behaved like one, generally I'm not an asshole. You know, and when it comes to around helping with the kids, walking the kids around, playing with them and all this stuff, unless I'm extremely exhausted and something is just badly wrong, generally wrong, then I will do it all with pleasure. I just love doing that stuff. So all in all, speaking, I wasn't just going to work and then drinking beer, watching football at home, because I don't watch football. As much as I do love drinking beer, we usually would have shared it either together, or I would drink a couple in a pool house, which especially when kids were small, especially when there was pregnancy and stuff, I would have not visited more than once or twice per month. Later on, when kids were already a little bit more independent and walking around, when things weren't so bad, I wanted this hobby of mine, which by the way, I am really talented at, and I'm really good at, as long as I can consistently keep practicing. So that was my aim. So clearly, I was a little bit more often in the pool house for about 1 to 2 hours, usually, maybe 2 to 4 hours, about twice a week, um, depending if there was a competition or not. But you know, the competition was quite fierce, so I would not last long anyway. So either way, I was present with the children. I was present with at the home. I did things as much as I could, but also, yeah, indeed, I needed my space when things were really bad. 2020 onwards, I needed my space. I needed something for myself. That was quite clear. Now, putting back to all that, what it was, there were a lot of back and forth dynamics, I would say, which to begin with were really, really triggering for me and just really bad, disrespectful in so many ways, and I could not find ways to react and respond to that any better than being a complete little, you know, I could say some words which probably should have been then beeped out. But I was really not responsible. I was immature, um, and started aggressively defending myself, because at the end of the day, why people say, why would you be aggressive? And I'm not talking aggression as in, yeah, we had fights, but these were two-way fights, and I when I did something wrong once under the influence of too much alcohol, I did really regret that, and I ate that up. But then all other fights, when I look at them, um, began with severe form of provocation and physical altercations already directed at me. Now, whether there were also children present, which bothered me even more, and it was all about getting away and ending that argument in front of the kids as fast as possible, and then trying to resolve this in a different kind of manner, different environment, not like that. But many times it was not possible, doors getting blocked. Yeah, just instead of being able to escape, it was just getting worse, more cornered, let's say. And just generally, I felt really bullied, pressured, you know, belittled, like I cannot describe how. So instead of being the smart person, the wise person, because of the children, because of everything, I thought I was just capable of somehow dealing with it all because, I'm already used to everything, I'm tough, and eventually, sooner or later, something has to happen and change, and the person will do something to realize what they're doing and change themselves, etc. etc. At the end of the day, maybe not all people are so narcissistic to begin with, but or they're hiding it or whatever goes on. But once it just keeps repeating continuously, you see how you actually got yourself stuck into this. So when I was defensive, when I was losing my own temper, I realized I was doing all of that and feeling angry because I was ultimately just angry at myself. Unlike in the case of having issues to deal with other people before, when they were like classmates and parents and stuff, this was still ongoing, and it's still ongoing, and it will to a certain extent have to continue because we share the children, and I just ultimately could not understand anymore what to do, what to say, how to, which is one of those traps, the worst ones, when you get caught with someone who has this narcissistic tendency and bullying. There's no way that it will ever come across when they could potentially say what they did in a way that it would matter to you, that it would really, really, and it's just not just about words, when it's obviously, it comes down to really changing also the attitude, the behavior, changing the habits. It doesn't have to work over the night, but things are really like not that hard. And that actually freaking broke me. In terms of like thousands of times when I ended up feeling in the same position, like I'm being pushed in the corner, I'm threatened, I feel it was manipulations, of course. It was just terrible, and I knew I have no possible escape. Not at that moment, like no place to go, no friend that would take me, nowhere. Outside it was impossible to go because of the conditions and the temperature and the weather. So definitely never wanted to end up hurting anyone again, because that taught me a lesson that it's like sometimes all you want to do is just hold people back and stop them from hurting you and hurting themselves. And it still ends up with accusations and charges and maybe police and whatnot. And you won't maybe get anything in the end because nothing really happened, but still, it will be always brought back onto you as your own fault, and you're the one that was aggressor and the bully. And then I actually ended up looking at myself like that. I felt like one, and I felt really guilty, I felt really bad. And this just ended up a never-ending cycle for myself. I judged myself so much. I felt so ridiculously bad because of my reactions, my own reactions, even though this is the part where I started to slowly learn that, you know, my reactions are my red flags. I should have been recognizing from the start of the relationship. So if something really made me feel so bad that I would feel angry and enraged, and it felt bad, I don't know, for reasons of whether it felt that, I don't know, the person was cheating or playing with my feelings, or a lot of things can happen that can make you feel really bad. So when they do, you have to really ask yourself, what do you want to do with that? Of course, it's best to also understand why you feel so bad, which is sometimes very difficult to do alone. But if the person right next to you is exactly the one who does these things and is not really willing to own their stuff and then help together, like grow through their own insecurities and help you figure out why you feel the way you do, obviously help needs to come from somewhere else, either an expert or a good friend or whatever it is. But it really helps to talk about these issues, because they are issues, and if you're not going to talk about them when they happen, oh, they just get worse and worse. So yeah, I kind of like ended up seeing myself as a bully, although fact is I was bullied either for what kind of the state of mind I was, and why I was in that state of mind, and all of those things, or bullied just because I was standing my ground and asserting my boundaries at some point, because things that were promised shouldn't have happened. A lot of things that I would have never done to someone I really care about and love have happened, and it was just humiliating. Extremely humiliating in many ways. Especially due to the fact that we had a family already together and have invested so much in each other. And then also later on finding out that this was not just, some of the things were not just coincidental and accidental things, and then there was a lot of deception and lie, not just to me, but also saying, like blaming other people and just using them to try and make it look like as if it was only them who feel certain things and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it was just a lot of, let's say, directly put it, love triangles going on. And you know, yeah, of course, I knew about certain things happening, but the point of all of that is that it requires complete sincerity about everyone's feelings about it and everything that's going on, because otherwise it's not a healthy relationship to be with someone who just doesn't want to tell you what they really feel about themselves, about others, and about you. Not just about you, not just about themselves for the most part. So yeah, I started to act and cross my own boundaries in ways I would have otherwise never done to anyone, because I felt like helpless and unable to go away. Of course, I figured out later on that, you know, in situations like that, when you're really pressured, when you're really bullied, the first thing you need to try and find is an exit. So do not get engaged into fighting, do not get engaged into violence, unless there is really no other viable option left. And then if you do have to engage, then please go train self-defense, go become strong, go do something that teaches you how to defend yourself. It's really, really very, very important. Um, Given that I'm not such an extremely good martial artist and I haven't practiced for many years, and I was still able to defend myself from a crazy killer, based on some of the muscle memory and good old knowledge that I've gained from training back then when I was still a teenager. So yeah, finding that exit, safe exit, and then whatever it takes, as tough and as long as the journey it may be, is better finding ways of forgiving them, forgiving yourself, before I'm doing anything else, of course. Unless personal injuries and the damage was so big. Okay, some technical and human issues there. So yeah, find an exit and just let it go. Forgive, move on, and let go, because life will definitely take care of those people later on. Unless the damage is really so big, like personal injuries, physical personal injuries, or otherwise. I'm not sure why in many places they would say that psychological damage is not as painful and not as potentially long-term damaging to someone's life and the quality of life as the physical injuries, because I believe it can be even worse. And as far as I can see, it can be a lot worse sometimes. Recovery might take a longer time even. Like in a case of broken collarbone, it took me only 5 weeks to recover. In a case of broken heart, it takes years to recover. Sometimes some people never do recover. So it's tough to say how much and when have you suffered so much that maybe people who have put you into that place should have considered doing something to make that right, rather to speak of any kind of vengeance and stuff like that. It's just about doing things, making things right, putting things back into the right place. But that's wishful thinking as far as I can see in the reality. So fighting is very often, fighting in any form and sense, is very often just not a very good option, because clearly now we live in a kind of environment in society dominated by fear, irrational and very emotional decisions and reactions. And if you're not doing whatever you do very carefully and just being extremely strategic about it, never mind how many times it is you who was probably the actual victim. Nowadays we live in a society where the abusers, the narcissists, and the bullies will act as victims, and if you turn out to be like one of us, not the actual victims of abuse, but the survivors, the people who survived, learned how to defend and fight, and always fought back with minimum use of force, still, that time when you stand up to them, the time when they see that they have no power over you, will only enrage them further. And don't think that any relationship or attachment or any kind of good feelings are worth it. Whether they're your family, your friends, your parents, your spouse, sisters, brothers, I've even had one comment on the channel here, and I really appreciate that lady for sharing that. And I do hope that honestly, at least herself, that she's watching this and that she will also know that sometimes it's still, even in the case of your own children, best to let go. Like I have two sisters, and both of them, especially one of them, has never shown anything else, any other empathy, and nothing else but herself. And of course, she's blocked. She cannot talk to me for many years. I feel bad. It's not okay, but it's the best thing I can do and the best thing that can be done. Because even when I finally did re-establish communication channels each and every time, it turned out it was only because she needed me in terms of my money, my favors, my connections, and my power. So, however difficult it may be to break up, break away, and just imagine a life without them, even when it seems impossible, it has to be done. And best revenge you can do with all these kind of people is to be a better you than you were yesterday. And then the next day, again, the same repeated process. That's the only revenge, I would say. As much as, like in my case, I believe that the justice would be a very nice paid vacation somewhere in a warm place for about 2 months where I don't have to do anything and enjoy. And very, I would say, not, it doesn't have to be a I hate 5-star hotels. It would be just as fine. The best thing would be actually on the coast of Namibia in a hostel, and just the money that I would use otherwise on these expensive things can be used for my skydiving license, for example. I'd take that as a token of appreciation of actually not ever taking the path of true aggression, violence, fighting with people in general, vengeance at all. I could have sued more than a few organizations here, I guess, if I had a good lawyer and some money. I could have sued my ex. I could have sued more than a few people who assaulted me here in Netherlands. I should have sued this guy who sent the SWAT team on me because he lied about everything that happened except for the toy gun. So, yeah, all these people. And I'm not saying that if I did have the power, I would have done it. To this last guy, most likely yes, but not for the sake of doing damage to him, but more like having an opportunity to face him and just ask him what was going through his mind before he raced to grab his bag, start to yell at me that he's armed, and proceeded to charge at me. Because I really don't understand people when you're already telling them, look, dude, I was already hurt before, I'm scared, please keep the distance, and still don't understand why they have to assert their own power, their own intentions, which were unexplained, and rather really in a vulgar, aggressive manner. I don't understand it, and I wish I could. I wish I could speak to them and just ask them those questions. I would like to understand what goes through their own minds. It's not about trying to understand their explanation, but just describe exactly what was going through that mind, and that's it. So one day we can understand and maybe see it from your perspective and understand why you do things the way you do, why you react the way you do, why you attack the people the way you do if it doesn't go your way, and all of these things. So, you know, it's fine, we get it. people that act like that, people that react like that, people that have to act like victims after they were the aggressors, we get it. You feel strong, I mean, you feel weak, you feel strong, I don't know what you feel, we get it. You have a problem, and I hope you'll be okay at some day, at some point in some day, but come on. You know, again, that's why these people won't. It's hard. Most of us will never be able to face them again. And even if you do face them, like in my case, in many cases, I do know, when you do try and face these people and talk to them, all you get back is the same kind of projection and blame. So in the end, it never ends. Kind of, not that it never ends, but the only person that can end that cycle is yourself. So again, like I said before, regardless of who it is, how difficult it may be, the only thing one can do in a dynamic with a aggressive, abusive person is walk away and keep walking. And walk your own path until you end up being happy enough on your own, or with another person that actually does support you, that actually does give you complete safety in being who you are. So that's it. Sorry for all the technicalities, as in bad picture and all this stuff, probably bad audio, I don't know how bad it will be. But it is what it is. You know, I'm not editing or doing any much thumbnails and AI because it's too much of that. It's better to be raw and real in my case, and well, at least I believe so. It's better to be raw and real. So whoever likes it, give me a thumbs up. Whoever doesn't, you know what to do. And I wish that I will be able to talk about any kind of subjects with more humor and more positive approach, but I'm just generally really tired because of all the stuff that keeps happening around. So yeah, wish me luck. I don't know what's gonna happen from here on, how far I'm gonna keep on pushing, but it is what it is. So every day I actually get back onto this is a good day for me because I see myself doing something I'm trying to commit myself to and do for at least my own benefit, if not the benefit of anyone else. Good luck, all the best to everyone. Ciao.